All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back, where this afternoon, sitting back with me, I have Reid Luedecke, PMHNP-BC, MSN and RN. He is a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. As a sub-investigator for community clinical research, Reid helps oversee both the conduct of individual clinical trials and the well-being of study subjects. During his formative years as a nurse, he gained valuable experience working in various inpatient psychiatric settings in Austin, providing compassionate care to individuals with diverse mental health needs. Reid received his Bachelor's of Science in Health Promotion and Health Education from the University of Texas at Austin in 2016. He then received his registered nurse license in 2019 and his Master's of Science in Nursing with a specialization in leadership from the University of Texas at Austin in 2020. As a psychiatric mental health nursing practitioner, Reid's philosophy of practice is rooted in the principles and values of nursing, focusing on holistic care that integrates the body, mind, and spirit into the treatment process. Along with his professional accolades, Reid's a family man with 2 siblings, if I did my research right. He's been to various places around the U.S., such as Pittsburgh, South Carolina, Vegas, the Dominican Republic, Philadelphia, Florida, and that's just what was on his social media. He's a marathon runner, concert and gym goer, descendant of the Citrus King of Rio Grande Valley, and today I'm excited to have him on the show to learn about his story of how he got into this field and talk all things trauma and mental health. Reid, thank you for being here and welcome to your episode on David's Saturday Night Sit Back.
Thank you so much. That was quite the introduction. You did some great research, some background on my social media, I see. I will say, for the record, I'm not a marathon runner. I wish I was.
Half marathon?
No, I don't think I've ever actually finished one. But I was organizing them for a while. I helped organize them, and like the large one here in Austin, I can't remember what it's called. I guess it's called the Austin Marathon. But
the one with Health Start Foundation?
Yes.
You didn't run that one?
No, I helped organize those marathons.
Gotcha.
I loved doing that in college. That was a fun time. I would recruit all my friends and people in organizations to go do water stations at the marathons, and but long distances are hard for me. I can do short distances, which is why I played tennis for a while. I can do some rowing, but man, long distances are rough for me.
I'm not a runner either. Cardio in general, my cardio is walking this little dog a couple times a day, and that about does it for me. Well, my apologies. No. I blame your Instagram.
No, I definitely have a mixed relationship with cardio, but I thank you so much for having me. This is great. I've wanted to do this. I'm a huge consumer of podcasts, so having the opportunity to do this for the first time is really interesting, really cool, and I like to talk about mental health and be an advocate for that. So it's great that you're having me on. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah, man. As sort of I got a couple icebreakers for you. One, I know you said you didn't need a drink because you brought water, but earlier today I made a mocktail, and I thought we should try this together.
Yeah.
I tried it. Take a sip.
Okay.
And here, cheers to your first podcast episode.
Oh, right. Spicy. Spicy. I like that.
So this is a jalapeno lemonade that I stumbled across, and I thought it's cold, it has a little bit of a kick.
Fire.
I followed the instructions to a T, and it came out spicier than I expected. And I thought whoever made this drink on whatever website I was on, they clearly like things spicy, because I probably would not have made it this spicy if it was my recipe.
I need the recipe. I love that. I love spicy things. So good.
Easiest drink ever. I'll send it to you.
Just needs a little bit of tequila, and it's great.
Dude, I know. If it wasn't a Sunday afternoon, I was having the same thought. I was like, man, some vodka, something else in this. But we're podcasting and it's Sunday afternoon, so we'll be good today. I have a picture of you from when you were a kid.
Oh,
I think this is you, anyways. That you?
Absolutely, yes. I was always a big Superman fan when I was a kid. My dad was also a big Superman fan, so he enabled me. And I had multiple birthdays, Halloweens, where I was dressed up as a superhero, probably Batman, Superman, maybe Spider-Man. But yeah, very into that.
Why Superman? Why was he one of your favorites?
I loved those original movies with Christopher Reeve.
Yep.
Absolutely loved those. I was always drawn to superheroes. I think it's the invulnerability, the power, the ability to save people. It's like this idealized thing that is intangible but also very real. You can see it. It's in a lot of movies and TV shows. was also a huge. I am also a huge Marvel fan, Disney fan, and so it's always been something that's been with me, and it's fun. I think it's just a fun, easy way to kind of turn your brain off when you're watching a movie and kind of be like, imagine that that's happening, that's real. Because I am a big movie guy. I like cinema, I like going to the movies, I like watching movies, and so it's always been like a fun escape for me. It's like being in that world. So, but yeah, big superhero guy.
Now, this might be opening up a can of worms.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts about the Superman that's going to be coming out probably about 2 to 3 weeks after this podcast episode drops?
Yes, I am excited. I'm also interested to see how it comes across on screen. It's very Guardians of the Galaxy. The director of Guardians of the Galaxy is making the Superman. You can kind of like look at it, and it has that patina. Like the colors are super bright, and there's going to be comedy, it looks like, and it's going to be a little bit campy. And so I'm interested to see how that's going to come across. But I think I'm excited. I liked Man of Steel. I liked I liked the darkness of Man of Steel. So this is going to be very different. It's going to be very different. I'm very much a movie optimist. I try not to like be critical of new movies that come out. I think they all like art is art, and it's all very like valid. But I think there's already been some criticism on the internet about the new one coming out. I'm kind of tapped into the Twitterverse, and I've seen some people criticizing how it looks, I think. So.
Yeah, I have a buddy who is a huge Zack Snyder fan.
Yeah.
And so we all, speaking at the Buzzmill, we were all getting coffee a couple weeks ago, and he probably went on a solid 15-minute rant about how upset he is about this movie. And it got to a point where I was just like, Austin, we need to move on. We get it. You're pissed. You hate whoever the new actor is, and you're not a fan at all of the director. And so I was curious if I might open a similar can of worms with you, but you seem like you're not as up in arms as good old Austin is.
Well, I'm a little upset. I think because they couldn't get that actor from Man of Steel because of like contracting problems, right? I think it was something to do with the studio and contracting him, and I think that's sad. Whenever you can't make an agreement with the studio and get the right person in there who most people want, I think that's not a good thing. That's sad.
Yeah.
But
and it's a bummer because I thought that was Henry Cavill, and I thought he was such a good replacement for Christopher, or not even replacement because Christopher Reeves has passed away. But of all the people they could have cast for Superman, I was like, man, Henry is crushing it.
Perfect Superman.
He looks it. He plays the part well.
Yeah.
So I was bummed to lose him as well, but I'm not losing sleep over it either.
Yeah, I'm like whatever. It's Superman.
Yeah.
It's not the most consequential piece of media, right?
No, of all the things that we could be up in arms about these days, that is not one of them.
Yeah.
Do you happen to remember? I might give you a few of these out of order. I think this is probably the one where you're next oldest. You remember this picture?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of my first days on campus as a UT student, and I swabbed my cheek to become a bone marrow donor, I guess. So like they take your DNA and they put you in the registry, and if anybody has like I guess a similar DNA that's compatible with bone marrow match, then you can get matched with that person and donate bone marrow if they need it. I guess if they have like like leukemia or something like that. But yeah, that was one of my first things I did on campus. I lived right by where they were tabling. I walked up and they were like, "Hey, do you want to join the registry?" I was like, "Sure, whatever." I remember doing that, and it was like that kind of started my not started. It was kind of like one of the first things I did on campus that was kind of service related. I spent the first 3 years of my time at UT just completely immersed in volunteering and giving myself to any cause that I could find. It was really quite something to behold. I was like 3, 4, 5 clubs sometimes, and I finally realized I was like, whoa, I have no time for myself.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. So my junior year, I started quitting things, and I started focusing on things that really mattered to me, and I ended up focusing on a couple of things like this really cool organization called GlobeMed, where I had the opportunity to travel to El Salvador. We sponsored a clinic in El Salvador, and I was able to go there, volunteer there for a month, and just see how they were doing with some of the projects we had funded there and help them fund additional projects. I was in Longhorn Band for a couple of years, but even that was like really just exhausting, and it took like 20 hours a week sometimes, like including football games. And I was just, I needed time for myself and to focus on my career. I wasn't focusing on school. I was focusing on these clubs. um, I played tennis in college for a little bit, like through the club tennis team, and that was great. I love tennis. And I did a couple of other service organizations through Rotary International. Have you heard of Rotary International?
Heard of them, yeah.
Okay, they have a college version and they have the adult version. And so I did the high school, college, and the adult version of Rotary, which is very like raising money for different causes like polio eradication or childhood hunger or literacy. And we would have like fundraisers throughout the year, raise money for a cause, donate that money, and that was kind of it. So I did that while I was in college, and really enjoyed my time in college. And I think what it taught me was how to say no to things, how to like focus on what mattered, and focus on things that were spiritually like what's the word I'm looking for? They were renewing. Like it was giving me energy, because I did when you focus on too many things at once, it's hard to. I think you can overextend yourself and you can get exhausted. And so a lot of people talk about self-care and doing things that give you energy and renew you. But if you're overextending and you're saying yes to everything, it's very difficult to do that. You're not focusing on you. You're kind of focusing on external things. And I found that I was doing that to distract myself from internal turmoil. I was kind of overextending, constantly filling my time and day with things, clubs, events, people that were important but weren't necessarily what I wanted to do all the time, or were distracting me from spending time with myself, right? And so when I got to my junior and senior year, I was exhausted. I was running on empty most of the time, and when I finally started quitting things and started focusing on myself, things started getting better. But yeah, I mean, if you want, I can kind of like I can tell you a little bit about my story and how I got to college and how I got to that point, and get you to where I am now if you want. I don't know how you want to structure that, but I can kind of take you through the highlights if you want.
Yeah, let me ask you a few questions
Yeah.
about current, so the audience sort of knows what
Sure.
they're going to get into if they stick around with us for the next however long we chat for. And then, we'll go back in time and sort of work our
Yeah.
way up. With where you are in life right now, do you have a singular objective that you're highly focused on?
Oh, that's a good question. A singular objective that I'm highly focused on. I really enjoy research, and I really enjoy, like, career-wise, I think I'm very focused on following this line of my career to an endpoint where I'm doing a lot of research and maybe doing my own research. I currently run clinical trials for big pharma. So all the big pharmaceutical companies come to our independent company and they say, hey, we need 10 people with schizophrenia to try this new drug on. And so we go find those people, we try a drug on them. I collect data on whether or not the drug's working. I send it to the pharmaceutical company. The pharmaceutical company sends that data to the FDA. The FDA says yes or no, right? And so I'm on the data collection side of things. I'm running the clinical trial, and I really think that this is some of the most important work being done right now in the mental health space, because we're on the verge of the next generation of drugs that have so few side effects and are really good for your brain and do some amazing things for people with chronic illnesses that are really difficult for them to deal with. And I really enjoy doing it. It's super fulfilling. I love the patients I work with. I like the setting I'm in. And I think career-wise, I'm focused on like doing the best I can at that, and also pursuing like maybe even a PhD, like doing maybe like more research that way. So yeah, I think that career-wise, that's my answer. I think life-wise and that kind of thing, I think I'm trying to find a creative outlet, like something that I can do that I find like creatively fulfilling, whether that right now that looks like poetry, writing, but I don't know if that might look like dance, art, music. Like I used to play trumpet. Maybe I want to play a different instrument. So I'm kind of like exploring my creative outlets right now, trying to figure out what I want to do. Maybe take a class or two. So maybe take like a social dance class or something, because I'm going to a lot of concerts and things like that, and so maybe I can incorporate like dance more into what I'm doing. So we'll see. I'm trying to currently right in the phase of my life right now where I'm trying to figure that part out right now.
Yeah,
so.
Excellent. And do you have anyone that you hope this episode reaches? Not a specific person like my mom or someone like that, but is there any like group of people who you think could benefit from the conversation we're about to have?
You were telling me before this started that a lot of the people who listen to your podcast are 24 and younger, right?
Yep.
I think a lot of those people are searching for meaning. They're searching for answers to maybe things they're struggling with. They're searching for ways to cope with our current environment that we live in. And I hope those people hear that and can hear this and can get some sort of comfort, or can maybe find some sort of meaning and find some sort of guidance from what I'm saying today. I hope that that's helpful for them. I know how confusing and a blur being young is. Like I can't remember a lot of what I was feeling back then, but I know it was always kind of anxious and blurred and chaotic and like moment to moment. And I feel like if people are stopping and listening to this and taking time to listen to something like this, I think it means that they're searching for something and that they're trying, maybe self-improvement or something, right? And I think it can be helpful to hear something like this from someone who's been through it and can maybe talk a little bit about it. So,
Huzzah. I love that answer. This will sort of segue into your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Given your age, when you were a teenager, was any social media out yet? Or what was like the status of the internet when you were in like middle and high school? Were we in it yet?
Yeah, it was, what was that original, social media? It's like the proto Facebook. What was it called? MySpace. So it was MySpace.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I briefly had a MySpace and I didn't really quite get it and I gave up on it. My friends had MySpace accounts. When I was growing up, it was very music related. People wanted to get music off the internet and put it on their device, or like have a CD. Burning music onto CDs was really big. So it was like LimeWire. LimeWire was huge. YouTube was. Back then you could just get on YouTube and burn music from YouTube onto CDs, and I was doing that when I was younger.
Napster was one of them.
Napster. We didn't really have much social media until Facebook came along. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we used. Yeah, it was mainly Facebook, I would say, when I was younger. And back then it was very tame and very like post. It was very like personal posts from people you knew.
Yes.
And now, of course, it's morphed all into this one conglomeration that we know today. But it was. I really enjoyed being so disconnected when I was that young. I enjoyed not having to worry about social media when I was that young. I had a phone only because my parents wanted to be in contact with me when I was traveling for band and tennis and things in high school. I think I maybe got one when I was 13 or 15. Like it was around there when I got a phone. And of course it was like, I think it was like my first phone was like a Walkman, like branded phone.
Yep.
And God, it was terrible. And then I think my second phone was an old Razor that my dad had. I loved the Razor.
Razors were cool.
Then there was one that was like a Crazer. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was like a skinnier Razor.
I did not get the Crazer.
Something like that. But yeah, and then of course when we got to college, I think I joined Twitter and Snapchat, and that kind of fell into the internet then. But yeah, I think the evolution of social media has been so interesting to see, and it also kind of tracks with, I think, mental health and how mental health is a struggle for a lot of people now. I think social media has really contributed to that. For sure.
And we'll definitely jump into that.
Yeah.
Are you an Austin native? Were you born here?
So I was born here. I lived here for 8 years. When I was in third grade, so I was born at Breckenridge Hospital, RIP. Now it's just a big hole in the ground. But I lived near Pflugerville and had a great childhood there. Was going to Dessau Elementary School basically on Dessau Road near Pflugerville. My dad got an opportunity to be a State Farm agent, and they asked him, "Okay, what county do you want to be in? You have to be in one of these 3 counties." And he chose one where he could walk into an agency where a previous State Farm agent had been, which is in Jackson County, It's 2 hours southeast of here, right along the Gulf Coast, an hour south of Houston, hour and a half north of Corpus, right in the middle of the Gulf Coast. Small town, 6,000 people, called Edna. And so I moved there when I was in third grade, and I stayed there for 10 years and graduated high school there. Uh, so I was a small town country boy, and I was like, I want to get back to the big city. I miss Austin. I had memories of it as a child. I remember enjoying it. I wanted to go to college, and I was in the top 10% program, so that thankfully allowed me to get into any state university for free. I mean, I didn't have to the application was accepted. Got into UT. Didn't really have any other like places I wanted to go. My dad was a huge Longhorn fan. We were going to Longhorn football games growing up. I went to a Longhorn tennis camp one time, so I was very Longhorn coded. I really wanted to go there. I get there, pretty big culture shock, I would say. It's a city of, it's like a city of 100,000 people on any given day, just the UT itself, and then you can. It's a walkable city. You can walk all around, go to any place you need to go. I didn't have a car for a while, and lived on campus. But it was a good culture shock. It was good. It was good. It was stressful for a little bit, but I figured it out, and I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed my time here. And so I've been here 13 years now, I guess, from then. So 2012 is when I came back to Austin. Yeah.
What was living and growing up in a small town of 6,000 people like? Was it fun?
It was fun. It's interesting. I look back on it fondly because everybody, which is good and bad, but mostly good. I was in walking distance from my best friends. I had my best friends who lived on the same block as me. We were hunting, fishing, playing in ditches. We had a ride your horse to school day, or or drive your ATV to school day. Our mascot were the Cowboys. So we, big hats, boots. Our mascot was literally a giant cowboy. It was a great time, and being in that small town environment also gave me a lot of opportunity to do well in school there. It wasn't as difficult to stand out with 80 kids in my class, right? I had 80 kids in my graduating class compared to maybe 500, 5,000, right?
Yeah.
In some people's classes, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a lot easier for me to get noticed and do lots of really cool leadership experiences, and drum major and all these things that I was able to do in high school really led to who I am today. Some really good teachers, some bad teachers, which kind of also informed my ability to succeed at UT. I had one of the worst math educations I could have gotten, I think, in Texas because of just a few teachers and some issues maybe with curriculum or something. I don't know. But math-wise, I just wasn't getting it. And so when I got to UT and I had to take calculus and chemistry and all these things, I couldn't do it. I couldn't pass these classes. But I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to save people and help people, and how to do that was a doctor, right? And so I came in, and I was originally a bio major, and I didn't even get into that. They were like, "No, you're going to be an undergraduate major." That was an undergraduate major. You wouldn't even have a major. It was just general undergraduate studies, right? And so I did that for a while and didn't know what I wanted to do, and started taking classes and was not doing well in the math related classes. And I was like, well, what am I going to do instead? So I finally found exercise science, and I was like, okay, I'm interested in this. This is interesting. Kinesiology, science of movement, physical activity. Maybe I wanted to be a physical therapist. Then I started shadowing providers. I shadowed a family nurse practitioner in my hometown. I shadowed a physical therapist, and didn't like the physical therapy shadowing experience. Actually, I thought it was really boring. I wasn't really into it. I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to do that. So, but I was like, I want to do something related to health, something related to wellness. Ended up with health promotion and health education because I found out I'm a good teacher. I like teaching people things. I get a sense of fulfillment out of it. I enjoyed learning about health and changing health behavior. So I stuck with that, and went on from there, thinking, okay, maybe I'll do something with this, or maybe I won't. But it's a stepping point. It's something. Yeah. It took me. It was years of turmoil trying to figure out what I was going to do in college because of that. Because I came into UT with all these extremely smart people, and I had come from a high school where I wasn't really necessarily getting all the tools I needed to succeed. I had most of the tools I needed to succeed, but I had to really kind of play to my strengths. And, those strengths were reading, writing, um, critical thinking, but not necessarily math. And so I had to like find a career where I could kind of do something with that. And nursing was kind of that opportunity for me. I was decent at statistics, which was what you had to take to do nursing statistics. And I was able to succeed in that, and I did all the prereqs required. And mind you, I didn't get into the UT nursing program twice. They denied me twice.
Because of grades?
First, an undergraduate. Well, you had to have like a 3.75 GPA and volunteer hours, and like they accepted 40 people a semester when I was there. It was really hard to get into.
You have any idea how many people were trying to get in of those?
Hundreds, because I had people all around me trying to get in when I was in undergraduate studies. I had most of my friends were pre-nursing majors, and they didn't get in. They had to find other things to do, right? And so we did. We found other ways to do it. And a lot of those people now today are nurses. Like they did it other ways. There's other ways to do it. And so I did, like me. I went around. I did it a different way. I worked. I was a full-time substitute teacher for kindergarten right after I got out of college. I worked as a tech support agent for a pharmaceutical company, like dealing with people's problems when they had issues with their injectables or their Botox. We even worked in finance for 6 months and like helped connect investors to hedge funds, or hedge funds to experts in different fields. And while I was doing all that though, I was taking prereqs for nursing and volunteering and getting ready to do something nursing related. And I finally did get into a program and got into some programs at UT that gave me my RN and MSN and then Psych NP in 4 years. So 8 years in total of school. So
woo,
got through it.
What was the biggest culture shock when you went to UT that you had referenced a few minutes ago?
I think it was kind of like being surprised by, it was kind of this feeling of, oh, you're not good enough. There's so many people around you who are so much better, right? They were so much smarter, valedictorian. Everybody you met was a valedictorian or whatever, or everybody you met was also a drum major, or they were, and I was in band, and I was also not the best trumpet player. I was okay, but I had spent years of my life with braces and like had such a difficult time keeping up with playing trumpet, because you have to have a really disciplined embouchure and you really have to practice so often. And if you don't do that, your trumpet playing sucks and you're not that good. And I had braces for so long that I had screwed up my mouth, and it was difficult to like continue practicing and playing. And so I was like, even in band, all these people in band were so much better than me. I was like, well, what am I not doing, right? I had this like constant feeling of inadequacy, I think, at UT for a while. I didn't feel like I fit in because I had come from this environment where, I had been doing so well in this small town, and suddenly I was bottom of the totem pole, like, fresh fish, like very much like fish out of water, right? But I think I came to like the adversity and grew in the adversity. And I think that's an important part, is finding your strengths and finding a community. And I was able to do that, I think, through band and through clubs and different activities, and made some lifelong friends at UT for sure.
And you had mentioned that part of the reason, in hindsight, that you had joined so many clubs is because you had some inner turmoil that you felt was going on. Do you mind talking about that for a few minutes?
So in high school, and I guess middle school too, it was pretty obvious to me that I was gay. It was pretty obvious. But I didn't think it was really an option. It didn't really make sense to me in that kind of small town setting. Like, nobody around me was gay. I didn't know anyone who was gay. There were some people in high school when I first got there that were older than me. Maybe I think they were seniors, who were kind of openly more flamboyant and like kind of gay, but they weren't talking about it. They weren't open about it. And so I was like, I just kind of like, reverted to masculine, straight, heterosexual, because that was safe and that was what I needed to be, right? And I had these expectations from my family, my friends. It was kind of like what was expected. And so because of that, I was really flat and almost depressed. Like, very, people would joke about how little emotion I would show in high school. Super serious. People just thought I was super serious and strict. And I remember we did really well in band my last year. We went to state, and I remember coming off the field after our our performance, and I was like talking to the director, and he was like, "How do you think it went?" And I was like, "Oh, it was terrible." And I was like, I was watching everybody, and I'm really upset with how it went. He was like, "What? What do you mean?" And I was like, "Yeah, I feel so bad about how bad it went, and I had this like I was just like so negative, and I couldn't be happy. But everybody around me was like super happy and cheerful, and like that was kind of like my story in high school was kind of like I had a hard time feeling emotion, expressing emotion because I was so repressed.
Yeah.
I think that was what was happening, and I think it's normal for people who can't be authentic. And I think this like when you can't be your authentic self, and you can't express who you are, it literally makes you sick. It literally makes you negative, depressed, sad, flat. It's kind of a sickness in you, and I think a lot of men struggle with that, especially if if they don't conform to this kind of black and white standard of sexuality that I think a lot of people want. And so yeah, I when I got to UT and was finally surrounded by thousands of people who were being authentic and were expressing themselves, I said, "Oh, I can do this. I can be who I want to be here." That's wild. I didn't consider that. It took me 2 years before I was comfortable actually talking to people about it and meeting people. And I was, it was kind of stressful because there was a part of me back in Edna with my family that was straight, heterosexual, and masculine, right? And there was a part of me at UT which wanted to be something else, right? And figure myself out and be different. Um, and I had to play that game where you have two faces, you have two identities, two roles, and that was stressful, very stressful. And it finally came to a culmination one night. I think it was my sophomore year where I was getting text messages from family members saying like, "When are you gonna have a girlfriend? When are you gonna bring a girlfriend back home? Your family would love to have a girlfriend at Thanksgiving, you know, like something
Yeah.
like that. Some like a lot of like pressure, you know." And I finally called him. I was like, "Hey, you're gonna have to give me some space, and you're gonna have to respect my boundaries. I'm gonna do whatever I want to do, and you're gonna have to be okay with that." And it went over well. They were okay with it. I got less pressure. They were like, "Oh, we didn't know you were stressed about this. Sorry. We'll take the pressure off." So that was nice. My parents were very like understanding of that. And then it took me another year to finally come out to them. I had to write a letter to them. I was so worried that they were going to disown me, that they weren't going to talk to me anymore. I wrote them like a one-page letter. I have it saved in my Google Drive somewhere. It was just very simple. It was like, "I'm gay. I'm sorry that you're probably not going to enjoy hearing this, uh, but I have to be who I am, and I can't like do anything else. And you know, it would be easier if I wasn't, you know, but at the same time, I have to be who I am." And so I just gave them. I drove off. I left the letter in their mailbox. Before I even got home, I had text messages from my family saying, "We know you're gay. We're totally fine with it. We love you." That was it. And that was my. For years, I antagonized over that. I antagonized over how that was going to go over. I thought they were going to disown me, and that's because that's what you hear about. That's what you hear about in media. You hear about it all the time, and of course, growing up in an environment where there are people who are on the more conservative side of things doesn't help because you hear homophobic comments. You are kind of indoctrinated with this kind of like more conservative, traditional sense of things, right? And that is just how people are in that environment, and I understand that. And so when you go to the big city, it's obviously different, and it's nice to be able to be more authentic here, especially in college. It was nice to be more authentic, and it took me years to finally be okay with who I was and who I am, and realize the impact that growing up gay in a small town had on me, and it had a lot of impact on my ability to express myself, to be emotional, talk about my emotions, to be authentic around people, not have a mask on, right? There's like a tendency for people to have a mask of masculinity or normative behavior on, I think, around certain people. And being able to break down those barriers and break down those walls is really hard for a lot of people. And it translates into things like problems in relationships, problems dating, problems, having good friendships and maintaining those friendships. And so I think if people can understand the importance of authenticity in your life and your health, I think they will do better off for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, well, first off, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You brought back a lot of memories just now. I grew
Mhm.
up in a private Christian school and also was closeted throughout until my college years. And when I was reading The Body Keeps the Score, which plug, neither of us are getting a royalty or anything, I loved it. So if you are looking for some good reading material, go check it out. I saw myself in those pages and just stuff I hadn't thought about. And I was like, oh, I've never, if you had asked me like, David, did you have a traumatic time in high school? I would have said no. And then I read The Body Keeps the Score. I was like, there was definitely there was some trauma in there for sure. I was hiding like who I really was.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting too that you are such a fan of superheroes because you did sort of walk that line of having a dual identity for a little while, and then had to contend with bringing all of that together and trying to be your just one Reid and not these two separate Reids based off where you were, who you were with. Another memory that you just brought back that I haven't thought about in years was one night when I was 19 or 20. I was living with my roommate Eli, and he had gone across the street to grab a bottle of whiskey or some beers or whatever, and he came back over to the house. I wasn't out yet. And he was like, dude, these two girls are coming over tonight. I got one for you too. And I remember I just broke down and started crying. And because I wasn't ready to come out, but I also this lady could not come over. I was like, what am I going to do with her? Like sit here and shoot the shit on the couch. And
it's terrifying.
And he didn't understand it. And it actually drew a really big wedge in our relationship. And we reconnected 2 or 3 years later after I'd come out and talked about a lot of that stuff that had happened when we lived together for that year. But yeah, dude, you feel like you're backed into a corner sometimes and you don't know what to do. So then you do things like just bursting into tears or going into a rage because you're trying to cover up this thing that you're not ready to come to terms yet. And it's a rough position to be in.
Defense mechanisms, right? Rage, anger, fear, crying, like these things come out like when you feel trapped. And so it's so interesting to see how different people act differently in those situations. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's a really tough thing. But I think thankfully for younger generations, it's getting easier. And it's getting easier. People are more accepting. And it's so nice to see, queer representations in media. Yep. You have amazing TV shows like Heartstopper or Love, Simon. Like just so many great depictions now of queer media where it didn't exist before, right? Yeah. And so I think we're moving in the right direction. People are becoming more accepting, and it's always interesting to see people, I think, become disarmed and more accepting when it's someone near them comes out, and they know them, and they're like, "Hey, I know Reid. He's a cool guy. I grew up with him. Maybe gay people aren't so bad, right?" Like it's like if once you get to know somebody and it's somebody you love or it's a friend, it's more disarming and it's more comfortable than it is the queer person you see on TV in media or whatever, right? It's like it's a better, I think it's a better thing, and I haven't had any negative experiences from people in my hometown or anywhere. Nobody's like been homophobic to me openly or anything like that, so it's been fine. I haven't had any issues. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Before we move on from college, is there anything else noteworthy during that time that you feel like adds context to who you are today?
So, towards the end of college, like I said, I was really burned out and exhausted. I didn't really know what I was going to do with my career. And then I was finally I was rejected for the last time from a nursing program at UT. And I was like, okay, I don't know what else I'm going to do. And I definitely fell into a depression. I was definitely depressed for the first time in my life. I'd never experienced that before. I went to UT Health, and they were like, they did all the assessments on me. I talked to a psychiatrist. I said, yeah, you're depressed. Do you want a referral to go see somebody, or do you want, like, what do you want? And I was like, yeah, just refer me to somebody in outpatient wise, and I'll go see somebody. So I went and saw somebody for the first time, and I think I started therapy for the first time, and I really enjoyed that. That was very helpful for me. Being able to talk to somebody, like express yourself, like talk therapy is very, I think, useful for a lot of people. I highly recommend it for most people. I think even if you're not depressed or anxious or whatever, it's a great way to just have a sounding board, like have somebody to talk to. and can make you feel less alone, less scared, and can make you feel more like assured in like what you're doing in life. But I continued to struggle with mental illness for years after that. So it was 2016, first bout of depression. Um, I think I started Lexapro for the first time, and that helped for sure. It helped a lot. Really corrected some brain chemistry I think was going on. And
What is Lexapro for those who don't know?
Lexapro is a SSRI, or a selective serotonin receptor antagonist or inhibitor. Um, so it basically just keeps more serotonin around for your brain to use. And it is one of the kind of like newer generation of antidepressants. It's not the newest, it's not the oldest, it's kind of in the middle. Um, it does like one thing, which is it works on serotonin receptors. And it's very good for anxiety. It's really good it's decent for depression. It, you know, a lot of people take it. It has some side effects like weight gain, sexual dysfunction at higher doses. So it's not clean. It's not the cleanest. There are cleaner. But it was useful for me. I gained maybe 10 to 15 pounds on it, maybe. I had some sexual dysfunction on it at higher doses. I even had some flattening of emotions at higher doses too. I mean, I had to decrease my dose multiple times because I was too flat. Like it makes you not be able to experience joy and express it. But it was useful because I learned that my major problem was anxiety, and we can talk about this more. But I was unsure, and I was unproductive. I felt unproductive. I felt like I couldn't get things done. I didn't feel like I had my place in life figured out, and I was anxious about it. And anxiety drove my depression, and they a lot of times go hand in hand. Come to find out, years later, I had untreated ADHD and didn't know about it. I got diagnosed with ADHD at 29 years old, and I did 6 hours of psychological testing to figure it out because I was like, what's going on? I'm exhausted all the time. I'm not getting anything done. I feel unproductive. And finally went and did this testing, and they were like, yeah, you have ADHD inattentive type. And they talked to my mom. My mom was like, yeah, he had all these symptoms when he was a kid. It's like, oh, well, there we go. Great. Turns out my brother, also younger brother, has really intense ADHD. My sister might. My dad might. And so, like, it's very genetic. You know, ADHD runs in the family. So that was really a huge revelation for me, was getting that treated. Once I started treating that, wow, I was productive. I could get things done, and that seemed to kind of like solve my anxiety. It seemed to solve my depression, right? Turns out I also had untreated sleep apnea, which I didn't know about, and I was still tired. I was taking a stimulant, and I was still tired, still falling asleep while driving. It's like, what's happening? This is not normal, right? Turns out I had sleep apnea now, which the cause of which I'm uncertain about. There are studies showing that sleep apnea can be triggered by trauma, and my time as a psych nurse in psych hospitals for 4 years definitely traumatized me, and we can talk more about that. But I think the trauma, the COVID, weight gain from COVID, all of those things could have, like weight gain from Lexapro and COVID could have definitely like led to some like new onset sleep apnea. Could have, I don't know. But I finally treated that, and I have energy now. I'm not falling asleep while I'm driving. I can go to the gym. Like my life's completely different than it was even 3 years ago, because I finally have dealt with these issues that I didn't even know I had. I had to go get tested and figure that out. So that's something that I think people like don't even know about, is you can go get psychological testing done, you know, here in Austin, and your insurance will pay for most of it. And you can just see if you have any, if you're you know, struggling, maybe you've been taking medication for a while, things aren't working, maybe you haven't, maybe you're unsure if you want to take medication and you're just wondering what's going on. You can go get psychometric testing done. I think it's called, there's a specific name for it. I'm blanking on the exact name for it. But yeah, psychological testing, there's lots of places around town to do it. So, but that was a great journey for me. What was your first question? I can't remember what the beginning of the question was.
We were
Oh,
talking about for
yeah,
formidable times in college. Real
yeah,
quick before I forget to ask,
yeah.
was this also about the same time that you started working out pretty regularly for the first time?
Yeah, so I tried. I tried working out through college and after college. I couldn't really I really couldn't gain muscle. I couldn't gain a lot of weight. I couldn't really do it consistently. Consistency was a really big problem for me. And I think it was energy, and it was like maybe I had untreated sleep apnea the whole time and I was just
Hmm.
didn't have energy to do it, I don't know. But I wasn't really able to do it consistently until I treated the sleep apnea. Because like if you have untreated sleep apnea, by the way, you're struggling with staying awake, you're struggling with focus, you're struggling with um, like your body is inflamed, your brain is inflamed.
Hmm.
It's a very sick place to be in, and you really don't have energy or motivation for extra things like working out. You don't have the ability, you can't really do it. Like, it's not something you can do. And so being able to finally get it treated and done, I can go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week now if I want to. It's so nice to have
Yeah.
the ability to do that. And now that I'm doing that, and I've actually changed my diet and had protein intake, I'm finally seeing muscle gain. It's so great to see.
Yeah.
Finally, it's taken years,
And
but
when you wanted to sleep, when you had your sleep apnea, or before you started
hmm
treating it, were you able to sleep well at night, or once you actually wanted to go to bed, it was a struggle?
so that's what's interesting is I struggled with insomnia for a long time, and it culminated after the pandemic with I would lay down at night and try to go to sleep, and the first 30 minutes of trying to go to sleep, I would have panic attacks,
Hmm.
and it was my body telling me, "Oh, you're not going to go to sleep because when you go to sleep, you quit breathing in your sleep, and it stresses us out. It
Mm.
stresses us out." My nervous system was screaming at me, telling me to do something because as I was trying to fall asleep, I was choking, and I didn't know that. And so when I would try to lay down at night, I developed somatic anxiety, body and anxiety, and it was triggered by my heartbeat. So I would lay down, try to go to sleep, I would choke in my sleep, and my heart would start racing. And then I would be like, "Oh, I must be having a heart attack. I must be having a palpitation. I must be sick. I must be dying." Like I would spiral into this rumination, this anxiety, this terrible space where of course causes insomnia. So I
Yeah.
felt crazy, couldn't go to sleep. My heart was racing. What is happening, right? So that was kind of what triggered me. I was like, I have to figure this out. I have to figure. So I went to the ER. I got an ECG done on I got like electrodes hooked up to me. I was like, "What's going on in my heart? Figure it out." And they were like, "Nope, that's fine." I was like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, yeah, because I'm not trying to go to sleep. That's why when you go to the ER and get ECG done, it's a point in time,
Yeah.
you know." So I had to go to get. I finally did the psychological testing. I did the sleep study, which was great. Loved the sleep study. That helped so much. I mean, it was easy. They gave me medication. I fell asleep. I figured out I had sleep apnea and uh, uh, periodic limb movements of sleep. My limbs move in my sleep as well. And so those two things together apparently were exhausting me, of course, and got all of that treated and was doing so much better. Because insomnia is really like an insidious thing. I mean, it can be
Yeah.
caused by anxiety, but because that's really what it is. It's like really an inability to fall asleep. If you're taking longer than 30 minutes to fall asleep, it's usually some insomnia there, and it's usually something to do with anxiety. Your nervous system is too amped up, you're too up, and you can't calm and get into that what we call parasympathetic relaxed state that you need to be in to fall asleep, right? And that's really what the background behind it is. And it's really makes you feel like you're going insane. It's really a tough thing to deal with, and if we can talk more about that, but yeah, but yes, that's kind of what my journey turned into. My journey was started with a depression, morphed into anxiety, morphed into me figuring out, oh, there was ADHD behind those things. And then once that was treated, whoa, I'm still tired. What's going on? And lo and behold, sleep apnea. And it's really interesting. I've met now, after discovering my own sleep apnea, I've helped 3 or 4 other people in my life discover they have sleep apnea and get treated. It's really odd. And I wonder if there's been an increased incidence of it happening because of the pandemic or something. But it's really been an interesting thing to see how many people have it in my life and around me. Even my boss, like, I mean, there's so many people who in my life I've met just in the last year who have sleep apnea. And just because I figured out I have it, it's been wild to see that. But I'm glad people are taking care of it, and it's becoming more and more of a known thing now. So
How are you sleeping now?
much better. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was using the machine. There's like a CPAP machine that you can put on your face, and it provides pressure, and it keeps you from your throat from collapsing. And I found a dentist who created a mouth guard that I use at night now that I love. And so yeah, just no issues. I can fall asleep when I need to fall asleep, which is so nice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had a week where I had some stuff on my mind, and I didn't even had a hard time sleeping for like 2 or 3 nights in a row. And that in and of itself, by the third day, I was going nuts. And that was just an isolated incident, right? Of just such a short period of time. But by Wednesday, I was just like, I'm gonna go mad if I don't fall asleep tonight. So I could only imagine living with that for weeks or months on end must be.
Let's briefly talk about sleep just a little bit. So
Yeah.
first, one of the most important things we can do is sleep, right? Your body repairs itself. You're cleaning toxins from your brain and your body when you sleep. You're repairing cells. You're processing memory. And so if you're a student watching this right now and you're not getting at least 6 hours of sleep after you study, you're not studying. Your brain will not convert the short-term to long-term memory needed to retain information for that big test coming up unless you're getting at least 6 hours of sleep. You need certain parts of your REM cycle and certain parts of your sleep cycle to convert those things you're trying to learn into long-term memory in your brain, right? And so if you're not getting at least 6 hours of sleep at night, you're really doing yourself a disservice. You're going to make your life a lot harder. And I understand that it is hard sometimes to sleep, but if you make the decision to prioritize it and figure your sleep out, your life will be a lot better. I will just say. And I mean, it translates into everything. It translates into inflammation, translates into anxiety and depression, and people who just aren't sleeping are usually not doing well. That's usually what I see in my day-to-day life. So,
Did you ever read that book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker by chance?
I have not read that.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
One of my takeaways from it was that sleep is almost like hitting a save button on a document that you've been working on all day. And so if you don't sleep that night, it's almost like you just deleted the DAR thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to save? Click don't save. And then it's there, bam, it's gone. I'm like, damn, that's a very unfortunate result.
I know. It's rough. But yeah, and I think there are lots of great medications out there for people who need help falling asleep or staying asleep. And so if you have any questions about that, definitely go talk to your doctor, your provider. And there's plenty of things that are very safe and non-addictive you can try to help you sleep. So highly recommend doing that if you're having any trouble. So.
And around 20, I think we're at about 2020 now, right?
Yeah.
That was when you got your master's. You graduated, correct?
That was interesting. Yeah, I graduated right after the pandemic hit.
Excellent. That June or May, probably.
Yeah, I graduated in December of when after the pandemic started, and I was the only person in my hospital with a master's degree, and the director of nursing was quitting and leaving, doing something else, and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna hand this off to you. You're the only person here with a master's degree. Good luck." And so I guess it was maybe a couple of months after I had finished my master's degree in leadership. I was then the interim director of nursing for one of the local psych hospitals here in town. And
congratulations.
During the pandemic. So I spent, I guess the first time I was the interim director of nursing, maybe it was like a 9-month stint, maybe 6 months. I can't remember exactly. And then they hired somebody else. But during that time, I was hiring and firing, performance reviews, filling in shifts for people who weren't showing up to their shifts, because during the pandemic there was the Great Resignation.
Yep.
Which was everybody was leaving, going to different things, and especially nurses. Nurses didn't want to be doing their jobs during the pandemic. I mean, they were, but it was harder and tougher, and a really stressful situation for a lot of people. And we were, N95'd up and using PPE in psych hospitals. We had COVID units in our psych hospitals. It was a really rough time. It was, the setting I was in was acute psychiatric care. I was literally tackling people, giving them shots, like on a daily basis. I was assaulted multiple times in that setting. And that specific setting, which is a step up from the ER, is what we call acute psychiatric care. Those are private hospitals. Those are not public hospitals. And I think, in my opinion, that system is broken. It is an extremely traumatic place for staff to work, for nurses to work, for techs to work, and they're not getting paid enough. And as somebody who was in that setting for 4 years, I would never go back. And it's an important part of our healthcare system, but it's definitely not, it's not run the way it should be. You know, it's for profit. It's not a safe place for patients or staff. You know, and it's just really frustrating to see how it exists now in the form it does. And you see it in the fact that lots of these hospitals are shutting down around town and they can't stay open, or staff don't want to work there, and they, you know, certain hospitals have certain reputations, blah blah blah. I'm not going to talk about the actual hospitals, but you know, it's tough to see that is what a lot of people get stuck in doing, and spend years of their life getting traumatized over and over again at these facilities. And patients, I'm sure some of the people listening to this have been to those hospitals. They're not fun. Nobody wants to be in those hospitals. And I had to apologize to so many people as a nurse saying, hey, I'm sorry, I know you don't want to be here, but we're both here and we're both trapped here. We have to kind of work together. We have to work together to get you out of here, right? And that was very helpful for a lot of people. It was like I was tried to be on people's side. I'm like, I don't want them to be there, you know. I don't want them to be in that situation. And you meet people when sometimes they're at the worst part of their lives, the lowest point in their lives, right? As usually being at that psych hospital, right? And so you want to be that kind, empathetic person and be someone who they can rely on and help them. And that's what I really liked about that setting, was you could meet somebody for the first time and you could really see tangible change by the end of the time they were there, because it was the worst point in their life, their lowest point in their life, when they were the most acute, whatever it was, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, suicide attempts, whatever, drug use, whatever. And you know, 5-7 days later, right, they could be a completely different person. They could be talking completely differently. They could be no longer disorganized. They could be no longer having hallucinations. They could be no longer delusional. They could be no longer suicidal, right? And you helped do that, and you helped get them to a place that's more safer, that they're feeling better. And it's a nice, like, kind of immediate kind of reward and that kind of thing. And that was what I was drawn to, was like this interpersonal emotional connection with patients, rather than a different type of nursing where you're maybe using a lot more procedures or injections or things like that. Like, you're doing a little bit less of that. You're kind of focused more on the interpersonal dynamic with you and a patient in psych nursing, which I really liked.
What made it an undesirable place from the patient perspective?
Well, for a couple of things. One is you're stripped of your phone and all your belongings, right? And you're given like a gown, or you're not allowed to have a lot of things on the unit. That was always stressful for people, especially in this day and age where everything is through your phone.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have phone numbers memorized, right, you had to like get your phone out, write down the phone numbers. You're kind of reliant on pen and paper. That's never fun for people. And then secondly was, you're there involuntarily most of the time. Mm-hmm. You're there on a court order, or you're there, for 72 hours at a minimum because of Texas law, because you were suicidal or whatever it was. And the only person who can get you out is the doctor. The doctor who you're assigned to is the only person who lets you out of there. Or the judge. The judge can also determine that you can leave. And then secondly, one of the most important things is the other people in the hospital are sometimes not all the way with it. And they are paranoid, or they're delusional. And they might think that you're a threat, or they might think that you're their long-lost cousin, or they might think that you are stealing from them, or that you whatever. And so patients get assaulted at these hospitals all the time, and it was difficult to stop that. Sometimes you can't, stopping that. Sometimes it was random, and like you can't predict it, right? You can't predict violence. But that's why I was also drawn towards teaching verbal de-escalation in those settings, where I would I eventually became a nurse educator in those settings, and spent a lot of time doing verbal de-escalation classes with nurses and techs. And sometimes I was doing 2 or 3 classes a week, 2 or 3 classes, 4 or 5 classes a month, like teaching staff members how to talk to people, and how to figure out why they're upset, and why they're agitated, and why they want to hurt someone, and kind of talk them down, and kind of work on getting their needs met. And that was a really like cool thing to see, was people being able to like take that into that setting and literally reduce the assault rates, and reduce the restraint rates, and reduce the amount of injections we're giving people, because you can talk to people and you can reach people, if you do certain things a certain way, and you don't have to escalate things, it doesn't always have to end with violence or restraint or an injection, right? You can sometimes you can get through to people if you do it the right way, and you're calm, and you're calm, you're talking to them calmly, and you're treating them with respect. You can kind of get to that point. But yeah, that setting was rough, but I learned a lot. I think it's important, if anybody wants to be a psychiatric nurse practitioner, that they are in that setting or in a similar setting, or they work at a state hospital or something where you are seeing people when they're acute and when they're not doing well, and you see people when they're at their lowest, and you can kind of see how to bring people back to a place where they're safer and feeling better. It's a really unique experience, and you learn a lot. I definitely would not give up the experience I had, for sure. I learned so much.
By being there, did you have any sort of worldview about humanity, that it was this way, and then by the time you were done with your time at that hospital,
my goodness,
you saw some sort of shift?
I came in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I thought, I'm going to change the world. I'm a nurse. I'm going to change the world. And, then I got assaulted multiple times, right? And when that happens, your whole worldview kind of shifts, and it's like, I'm there to help people. Why would they hurt me, right? Like, why would you? I'm there to help you. I'm on your side, right? That's what you think. But you have to realize that the world isn't black and white. It's gray. It's always gray. Everything's gray. And people are not rational when they're sick. They're not doing well. They're not thinking right. And you have to kind of just be okay with that and accept that. There's a level of acceptance of that you have to have. So when I left that environment, I had unresolved trauma I hadn't dealt with. I was jaded, really. I didn't think that I kind of lost faith in humanity a little bit. I thought, if people are like this in psych hospitals, there's no end to how I kind of lost faith in people's ability to be kind to each other and help each other and be nice, right? Because I just felt that if it was like that there for a nurse, right, then how was it for other people, other places? Like, I don't know, EMTs, doctors, nurses around the country, people who devote their lives to helping others are getting their whole world turned upside down in some cases, right?
Yeah.
But I think several things helped me, which was, finding a career that is fulfilling, right? So purpose. One of the 3 P's, which I call people, place, and purpose, right? And so when you're lost, when you've been traumatized, when you're struggling with like finding something fulfilling and finding your place in the world, I think people could benefit from focusing on people, place, and purpose. And one of those things was purpose for me, which was finding a job. I got extremely lucky and fell into this amazing research role with one of the leading experts in the world in antipsychotics or dopamine modulators, as we call them now. He got most of them approved in the last 30 years. It's been amazing to work with him. And then people, finding clubs, organizations, groups here in town that I can I made friends through, and surrounding myself with people who are positive, who are people who I actually want to spend time with, who I can be authentic with, right? It's people who aren't bringing me down, people who I find interesting and enjoyable to be around, right? You want to surround yourself with those people in your life, right? Yep. When you're surrounded with people like that, it's healing. It's healing. It helps you be yourself and be the best that you can be, right? And then place, where you are, right? And where you're putting yourself. Where are you going in Austin? Where are you hanging out? Are you going to the club every single night? Are you going to a place that stresses you out? Do you enjoy being in Austin? Like, what city are you in? Where are you? Where have you found your place and purpose and people? And when you put those things together, it should hopefully be a positive healing experience for you. And I was able to do that, definitely post-trauma. But also, it took a lot of therapy. I did EMDR. I did ketamine-assisted psychotherapy with a provider. And those 2 things really got me to a place where I was no longer struggling with trauma. I was easily startled from loud sounds after my experience in the psych hospital. Anything loud easily startled me. Even in movie theaters, I was getting easily startled by the movie when it was like something loud would happen, gunshots, whatever. I was looking over my shoulder all the time. I was constantly aware of everything around me. I was so worried someone would come up behind me and just nail me or something like that, whatever. My nervous system was haywire. It was more than 2 cups of coffee a day, and I was down for the count, jittery, anxious, panic attacks. I tried edibles at one point in college, or right after college, and during this time when my nervous system was haywire, just immediately triggered a panic attack. Immediately, any sort of stimulating thing was triggering panic attacks, and I was like, okay, I can't keep living like this. So I first tried talk therapy, and I realized, no, this is not going to be enough. And then I went to school, and while I was in school, learned, no, there are specific types of trauma therapies that are better for people with trauma, like EMDR, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. There are certain things you need to do to reprogram these fragmented traumatic memories in your brain. So when you experience trauma, the experience of it actually fragments the way it's stored and processed in your brain, and that leads to these triggering episodes where events that remind you of the trauma, or being around where the trauma was, or re-experiencing things that are similar, or kind of flip your fight or flight switch and make you go into this fight or flight mode. And you have to kind of reprocess those things in a way that's safer, and you have to create a new narrative with that traumatic experience in a lot of cases to no longer be as reactive, what we call reactive, not as up, not as triggered, right? And I had to find a specific trauma therapy to do that for me. And a part of it was definitely ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, where I went and did 6 sessions with a provider who gave me an injection of ketamine. 30 minutes later, after I woke up from that experience, we would just discuss how I was feeling, what I was talking about, and that was wild. That was intense. Highly recommend that if you can do it. Insurance will pay for half of it usually, depending on your diagnosis. I had to figure out what dose worked for me during the sessions, because I didn't like being completely dissociated and being you can have these ego death experiences on ketamine, where you become so dissociated from yourself that you're on Mars and you're somewhere else. You're no longer on Earth. I didn't like that. That wasn't fun for me. But I like to have just enough ketamine where it felt like I had been drinking 2 or 3 margaritas, and then I could just talk about how I was feeling easily. I could just talk more free flowing, and I could talk to my therapist and have that experience, and that was very healing and very helpful. And then EMDR was really cool. I had no perception of how that would actually help, and literally just moving your eyes back and forth over the course of a minute or two, and and you don't even have to think about the trauma. It just comes to you. These images that are unprocessed and fragmented start flooding into your mind, and suddenly they become processed. Suddenly they become less fragmented, and over time you become less reactive. And so as you're then focused on that trauma by your therapist, well, after you've been doing these EMDR sessions, the memory becomes less traumatic, less stressful, less triggering. It's really wild. It doesn't work for everybody, I will say. It works for a lot of people, and it's why the VA will pay for it for veterans. It's why the VA is going to be paying for ketamine for veterans. There's a lot of these trauma therapies now that people are realizing, oh, these work, and they're super helpful. And for example, this is a new therapy that's not approved yet from the FDA, but it was going to be approved until recently. But for example, I did one of my things I wrote about and my research when I was graduating with my master's was the fact that veterans who took MDMA during MDMA-assisted psychotherapy sessions, when they left after 3 of those sessions, 75% of them left without PTSD.
Wow.
And that's wild. And so what's happening is these psychedelics like ketamine and MDMA and psilocybin, they're helping rewire your brain. They're helping heal it. They found that all of these medications have, all these psychedelics have this neurogenic property where they actually improve neurogenesis and neurons start rebuilding and repairing. And they, at the end of that result, is a less inflamed brain, a less reactive brain. And also, when you pair that with really great trauma therapy, you like double its effect and you get this really great influence on your brain and reprocessing and the ability to sit through those sessions. A lot of people can't sit through a session with a therapist and talk about their trauma without something to help them feel better or more relaxed or more open, right? And so that's what these drugs are doing too, is they're helping people sit through re-experiencing their trauma and when they normally couldn't, right? When they normally wouldn't be able to sit there, it'd be too painful, right? And so it's really cool to see the next generation of like I think will be trauma therapy and trauma healing, and it's already here, but it will get better. Is my point.
Yeah.
So it was great. It was cool to experience that on the ketamine side of things. Is what I'm trying to say. It was like that was interesting to see because I had learned about it in school and was really lucky to even one of the people who taught me in school was actually a therapist and introduced me to ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and so that was really interesting to see and experience. And yeah, if anybody has any questions about that, feel free to ask. But yeah.
Did you ever happen to work with any patients who were maybe teens or younger folks who felt like they, when you were talking about the 3 Ps, one of those Ps is people, and they felt like they couldn't change their people situation necessarily because they're a minor, maybe they don't have the money or the funds or the resources to move out. Did you ever fall into one of those kind of situations where someone opened up to you about that and they were trying to, they couldn't really escape the people even if they wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, it's really common. As a minor, you are kind of trapped in your situation.
Right.
I worked with kids at a treatment center in San Marcos who were there for sometimes 6 months to a year because they were doing so badly at school or so violent or so suicidal, and they needed a place to be where they could be monitored, given medication, and be in school. So it was a school too. And a lot of those kids were almost all of those kids had really tough family situations. And what's interesting is when you take them out of those situations and put them in an environment where they're nurtured and cared for and given lots of attention, they get a lot better, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say that it's important that anyone who's struggling with that and it feels trapped and it can't really change their situation to realize that it's temporary. It will get better, and you've got to do what you can do now to help keep yourself safe and keep yourself sane. And sometimes that looks like leaning into a really good friend, leaning into a sport or an activity you like, or like I said, people, place, and purpose. Finding those things in your life that you can, and really using those things to cope. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to coping skills. A lot of people would prefer a distraction over a coping skill. That's what I did for a long time. Was I would watch YouTube, or I would fill my life with things that would distract me from my internal world, but I wouldn't deal with my internal world. And I think that's the difference between a coping skill and a distraction. Find coping skills that you can use that can help you deal with your internal turmoil. Meditation, like exercise, nature, socializing with people, get on a Discord call with your friends, play a video game with your friends, find community, find coping skills that work for you, but specifically that fill you up, that nourish you. Nourishing coping skills, I think, are the difference between people who then fall into dysfunction and mental illness and people who are resilient. If you can figure out what helps you feel nourished and comforted and self-soothe, if you can self-soothe correctly and healthily, you're going to be a lot better long-term in terms of your resilience, right? So you can go online and look up 99 coping skills. There's a huge PDF that a lot of therapists use. It has like a list of 99 different like coping skills on it, and just look through those. And if you need some ideas, but some people will be like, oh, it's like I go to yoga, or I exercise, or I go on runs, or I play video games, whatever that is for you, whatever it works for you. Just make sure it's not totally encompassing and distracting. I think video games are the thing that can be good and bad. People can sit there for 5 hours and play a video game, right? And it can be too much. Or you could do it for a couple hours with friends on a weeknight, and it can be really a good thing. It can be really social. It can be really nourishing. It can build community, right? So you have to kind of like, I think what I want to get into is a conversation of boundaries, right?
Yep.
And because I think people who are younger, especially, are have to rely on social media and video games and Discord and online things to stay in touch and have a social life and be a part of this world now is social media and being online. And that is sometimes the antithesis or the thing that is opposite of what is healthy, especially if it's not in moderation. And so I think what the conversation I want to have is about moderation and boundaries, right, about these things, because there are many studies showing that social media like Facebook, Instagram are specifically very bad for the mental health of young people, specifically very bad, to the point where these companies have had to introduce kid-friendly, like, security profiles specifically for kids, because it's so bad for their mental health, like, to be on there for so long.
Do you know what those kid-friendly profiles are regulating? Is it keeping like X-rated material off there? Or?
It's that, but also not letting other people message you, and also screen time. So it's like a combination of things. The parents can go decide how restrictive they are, apparently. But again, they did this. They didn't do this proactively. They did this because they had to, after a bunch of studies came out showing how terrible their companies were. I mean, their social media platforms were for mental health, and they were going to get sued, and Congress was going to regulate them. So they not proactively, but retroactively added these things only recently, only like a year ago maybe, did these profiles exist for kids or adolescents, and don't get me wrong, social media is extremely important. It's how I made a lot of friends in college. It's how I organized groups and events in college. We used Facebook for everything. We had Facebook events for every single thing that happened in college. We had Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, GroupMe. All of these things were super important to community and connecting. The problem then becomes boundaries and how long you're spending on these apps. What you're using them for. Are you consuming, or are you creating? And how long are you doing those things for? And I think where people get stuck is the comparison to other people. Mm-hmm. They sit on there and they ruminate, meaning they think and get trapped in this like cycle of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not doing the things I should be doing because that hot person is doing those things, or that person I want to be is doing those things. And look, that picture they posted, they look so perfect, and I should be doing that. FOMO, fear of missing out, and this idea of comparison to others, and I'm not good enough or I'm not doing enough, is really toxic, I think, and can make you very sick if you sit there and use social media all day long, and don't moderate your use, and don't moderate how you're using social media. So one thing I do is I try very hard to not be a consumer on there. I might post things on there, or I might use it to message people, but I'm trying to not scroll through it, and I'm trying to not consume a lot of it, because if I do, I know I'm going to get trapped into that cycle of like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I'm not doing this, I don't look good enough, I don't look like this, blah, 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 blah. You get trapped in that kind of cycle. And you can also, there are now ways to set limits on screen time and phone time. Your phone can tell you, hey, you've been doing this way too long. You've been on here for 3 hours. You need to get off, right? You can do that, and you can set those like limits on yourself now, which is nice. But I think changing our relationship to social media is going to be important going forward. I think people are going to realize how toxic it is and how bad it is for you, and it's going to be. I hope it will shift to more of a tool for connection.
Yeah.
And more of a I think it is that, but I think I hope it shifts more towards that in the future, where it's more for organizing and getting together in person and being in person, because I think a lot of people, especially younger people, have forgotten how to be social, especially after the pandemic.
Yep.
It's been really difficult for people to be in person, to make eye contact, to make friends, to learn how to interact with each other in person. And they don't have to. They can go online and they can talk to people all day long. They can you can get on Discord and talk to people and play video games. You can watch somebody play video games on Discord. You can go on YouTube and get most of your news from YouTube, and you can be trapped in this online world all day long. I just hope that these tools become I hope that these social media platforms becomes more of a tool to improve people's mental health in the future than it looks like it is right now. So,
two quotes I wanted to read to you from The Body Keeps the Score. They're
Yeah.
both super short. That's another side of this whole social media
Yeah.
type thing, is that this one hit me pretty hard. 90% of human communication occurs in the nonverbal right hemisphere of the brain. And I have this buddy named Jack, and every time we see each other at the gym, he always has the biggest smile on his face. And I ran into him, I think the day that I read that, whatever chapter that was in, and it made me realize, like, I love that. I love that when I see Jack when we're at the gym at the same time, he always has this huge smile on his face.
Yeah.
And so if you and me only ever communicate with each other over Instagram Messenger or whatever it is, we never actually see each other smiling. There is another section of the book where they were talking about how when you get to touch people, it helps you regain a sense of control through hugs or handshakes. So that's another element, another sense that we're taking out, that we're not able to shake each other's hands or give each other a hug if we're only communicating through social media. And then earlier on in the book, it had mentioned that if no one has ever looked at you with loving eyes or broken out in a smile when they see you, if no one has rushed to help you, then you need to discover other ways to taking care of yourself. And if you don't, you are likely to experiment with drugs, alcohol, binge eating, or cutting. So it's one of those things. It's not just what you are doing, and if it's comparison, but it's also what you're not getting. That we get so much out of these human interactions that we can never get if we're only ever texting each other through a game, Instagram, Facebook, whatever the medium may be.
100%. I teach people in verbal de-escalation about how 90% of verbal de-escalation is not what you say. It's how you look. It's how you present yourself while you're saying it. It's nonverbal communication, because people respond so much to nonverbal communication that they don't even know it. And things like touch can be super healing, which is why there are now entire therapies devoted to touch, massage therapy, somatic therapy, even like acupuncture can be healing. But yeah, there's even the chemicals that trigger in your body from touch: oxytocin, serotonin, all these things that are important for connection and for feeling comfortable and feeling comforted by people in your life. So if you're not getting that, if you're not getting touch and community, then you're gonna be sad. You're gonna be anxious, right? And so one of the first things I did when I became a nurse practitioner was create a form, like a handout for patients. It was a list of pharmacological interventions they could do in their daily life to be like less depressed, less anxious. It was just instead of medication, what can you do, right? And so the first thing on the list is go outside, get sunlight, right? Get sunlight in the morning. Get physical with people, touch them, hug them, cuddle them, be near them, be close to them, right? Have physical proximity and have that closeness with somebody, because that can be very healing. It can be very comforting. Get community, like have a community, be with people, be social. Eat well, sleep well. All these things are on this list, and it's interesting to think about how our lives are way more holistic. Like our health is way more holistic than I think we take it. And part of that book, one of the things I took away from that book, The Body Keeps the Score, the most for me personally, is how healing movement and I guess touch kind of comes into this, but how healing your body can be for you. So your body keeps the score it remembers the trauma you've experienced. Your nervous system remembers the trauma you've experienced, right? And one of the ways you can kind of heal from that is by getting comfortable in your body and moving and feeling like you can release your tension and through physicality. And so one of the ways I do that is through dance, right? And so one of the things I've learned about and read about, especially in this book, the book kind of talks about it, is how for thousands of years humans have been dancing, usually when they're grieving or when they're happy, right?
Yeah.
Why do we do that? Because it feels great to dance after something traumatic has happened or after something good has happened, because it's this physical thing. There's community in it. There's closeness in it. There's joy in it. Grieving is a natural part of the human experience as well. And so to do that at like a funeral or a wedding or a celebration is very natural for humans, right? And they've found that people who are traumatized can heal and feel so much better in their body and not feel so detached and feel comfortable through dance. And it's kind of a way of regulating your nervous system in a way. It's kind of like what it does. And so that's one of the things I've done in my life, is incorporated way more movement and physicality and dance in my life. And so sometimes, like yesterday, I went to a concert last night. I danced for 3 hours straight. I timed it on my watch. 1,200 calories in one night from dancing. And that doesn't even describe the cardiovascular benefit you get from 3 hours of dancing. There's a bunch of really great chemicals that come out in your brain and your body when you do something like that. And you do it with people. You make friends. You're doing it with friends. You're listening to great music. There's a huge compounding benefit on all of that. Very positive, very good thing for your brain. And that's one of the reasons why I go to so many shows and concerts, is I enjoy it. It feels good. I feel so much better after I've spent 3 or 4 hours dancing, right, than I do if I didn't do that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the really cool things I pulled from this book, is how the body keeps the score, but you can also use that to your advantage and kind of find creative and unique ways to help your body feel more comfortable and your nervous system feel more comfortable, right? And that's kind of what I've discovered through dance and other things. But yeah,
We'll come back to another couple of solutions, healing methodologies in a minute. One of my favorite quotes from the book that I wanted to ask you about was that being human is almost like having a guest house, and every morning you're going to have a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes in as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Treat each guest honorably. The dark thought, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes in, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Which is such a beautiful quote.
beautiful quote.
And we might already be talking about this through talking about dancing, but let's say there's someone who happens to be listening who feels like they are in the middle of the dark night of their soul. And they're like, that's a really beautiful quote, guys, but how do I open the door and welcome in with a smile the darkest parts of my story? What are some other practical ways that you've been able to do this?
Yeah. I'll talk about one of them, and this is not everybody can do this immediately, but I think being present and being intentional about experiencing my emotions. And so what I mean by that is, if you're in a dark place and you're experiencing really negative emotions, what's interesting about the human experience is it's usually very temporary, right? And it's usually something that you can try and cope with different ways, right? But emotions are usually things that we experience and then they move on, and there's usually another emotion after that, right? And so one of the things that we tell people a lot is to be very intentional and mindful about what you're experiencing. Why? So if I'm experiencing sadness, being mindful about, okay, I'm experiencing that now. Why am I experiencing that? If you can't get to the answer of why, it doesn't matter. The point of it is, I'm experiencing it, and I'm okay with that, because I know that an hour, 2 hours from now, maybe I won't be, or maybe I'll be in a different place, or maybe I'll do something that will help me feel better, or maybe I can just be okay with the fact that right now I am sad. Maybe tomorrow I won't be. And that's a great thing about the human experience, as it is very temporary. It is very fluid. It's very dynamic, and you can kind of manipulate that in your way with things like mindfulness, meditation, coping skills, all these things we've been talking about can kind of change and modulate your emotional experience. And, you know, sitting in that emotion, wallowing in it, ruminating on it, focusing on it, can amplify it, make it worse.
Yeah.
And so being proactive and trying to do something differently can literally sometimes be 10 deep breaths while just kind of focusing on your body and how you're feeling in your body. It can be a meditation app on your phone. It could be a walk. It could be walking through a park, hanging out with your dog. It could be anything. But I think what that quote and what we're talking about kind of is being intentional and being mindful about emotions, and that they are temporary things, and they don't define us, right? Yeah. They're not something that is permanent and labeling. And just because you're sad a couple times a week, a couple times a day, doesn't mean that you have to be a sad person and that is who you are. It can be something temporary. It can be something that you work on. It can be something that gets better. Because a lot of the struggles that we deal with, especially mental illness, don't have to be something that define you, right? It can just be something temporary. It can be a passing wave in the ocean. The ocean, vast, wide, full of opportunities, right? Full of hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another random question I'll throw your way. There was a section of the book that was talking about how sometimes airing out your dirty laundry is not always the best way to go, because friends or family or organizations may get tired of hearing over and over again that you are still stuck in this grief, trauma, whatever it may be. And it's interesting because me and some friends are currently navigating something right now where we have one particular individual in our circle who has not made it to the last couple of events. And I was finally able to connect with him one-on-one. And he's told me a couple of times now that he has anxiety that's so bad that he can't even get out of his bed. His door's closed, windows are closed, can't get out of bed, not showing up to a lot of events. And so for people who are on that side of it, and I was hoping to find a solution in this book. I don't think I really found one, but it's hard because there's the one side of me where he's almost coming off as like the boy who cried wolf. And it's like, we haven't seen you in a year. You say you want to come out with us sometimes, but then when we do go out, you never show up.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side of me who is extremely compassionate and empathetic, and I want to be there to help them and be a shoulder to cry on. From I guess my perspective, or to that person, do you have any guidance of how to be a source of light and hope, but also not allowing yourself to ask like, oh, am I getting taken advantage of here by this person who's just very flaky? If that sort of makes sense.
I've learned that people people who are in states like that, that's a level of dysfunction, right? So there's a spectrum of mental health and illness, and there is a level of dysfunction, especially in anxiety, where you're no longer functioning at the level you were before. You can't go out. You can't interact with people. You are trapped in your room, right? When the people are at that level of dysfunction, a lot of the times you can't do anything. You can just be supportive, because they're in their own journey. You're not responsible for healing them or helping them or making them better. You can do what you can do as a friend, which is be supportive and encourage them to go talk to a provider, because a lot of the times people like that are experiencing a level of mental illness that is dysfunctional, meaning they're losing function in their life somehow, right? Either it's they're not getting to work on time, they're not able to do things with friends, they're not taking care of themselves, whatever it is. There's a level at which it becomes dysfunctional. And one of the things I would encourage anyone who's wondering about that and how to define that is go do a rating scale online. And there's a really great website called mdcalc.com. You can go on there and find most rating scales for anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar disorder, and you can do them yourself. And it'll explain to you exactly where you land on the scale and how sick, how severe your sickness is. And you can use that to have a conversation with your provider and say, hey, I scored a 10 on the PHQ-9 for depression. It says I'm moderately depressed. What do you think? And then you guys talk about that. And you say, oh, well, why did you put a 3 on that answer for not being interested in things you used to be interested in? Like, let's talk about that. Maybe you're having what we call anhedonia, or maybe you're on the generalized anxiety disorder scale, the GAD-7. You have a 3 for inability to be relaxed. Like, oh, maybe you're really tense all the time. Let's talk about that. So, like, you can use these scales to kind of like put a definition at one point in time of how severe your illness is, and you can kind of see like, hey, maybe there is a level of dysfunction in my current life that could be better with either therapy or medication, right? Medication is not for everybody. Therapy, not necessarily for everybody. Maybe you don't need it, but both of those things can help people become more functional. And so I would say if anybody has people in their life where they're like wondering like, hey, what do I do with this friend who is no longer able to do things with me or hang out with me and is not taking care of themselves, a lot of times only thing you can do is just be supportive and encourage them to seek help. And help looks different for everyone, and it doesn't necessarily mean interacting with the mental health care system. Doesn't necessarily mean that, but a lot of times when there's a level of dysfunction that is causing trouble in that person's social, work, family, or other parts of their life, then sometimes an intervention can kind of be the best thing at that moment. And it can be pretty fast resolution. 3 to 6 months later, sometimes that person can be much better and able to reintegrate back into their previous life or whatever they were doing, right? And so that's what because part of what I do all day long is I diagnose people with conditions, because you have to have certain conditions to be in a clinical trial. You can't have depression and be in a schizophrenia clinical trial. You have to have schizophrenia. So one of the things I do all day long is I assess people for different disorders, and part of that is also what I do all day long is I see how severe their disorder is. And one of the things I do is I use rating scales all day long to see how severe that is. And sometimes if there's not a level of dysfunction present in someone with schizophrenia, they can't do an acute exacerbation trial with me. I need somebody who's not doing well, who's experiencing voices or hearing things, or depression. I need somebody who can't go to work or is having trouble with motivation or interest in doing things they used to do, or they're really low energy. And like, I have to figure out how am I going to figure out how sick they are, right? I have to do that sometimes with these scales and figure out like, oh yeah, they're a 12 out of 27. Yeah, and they're sick enough, right? And so if anyone is curious as to how they're doing or how their friend's doing, these scales are very widely available. They're online. It doesn't take a master's degree to figure out how to answer questions. You can answer the questions on the scale. You can take them to your provider or take them to somebody who knows more about them and talk about them. You don't have to. This doesn't mean you have to take medication. It's a great way to figure out where you are at one point in time and kind of look at that and say, okay, maybe I do need help, right? But again, I think you can't force your friends to do things sometimes. Sometimes you just have to be present and be there with them and say, hey, I'm here to support you in whatever you need. But it sounds like you're not doing well, and if you need anything, let me know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the hardest part too, we sort of touched on this earlier an hour ago when we were talking about coming out, is that I could imagine that asking for help, even that could be such a hard thing sometimes, because in your head, you almost feel like you're admitting some sort of defeat when that's not what it is. You're not defeated. You are taking the first step to getting that weight off your shoulders and starting that path to recovery and healing, so that you can be that person who opens the door when the different emotions come and greets them with a smile. But I imagine, that must be the hardest step for people sometimes, is just saying on their own will, their own time, I need this help.
Yeah, that vulnerability is hard for people. People don't like to be vulnerable. They want to be safe, and they want to be in an environment where they're used to, right? They don't exposing themselves to that extra level of scrutiny is vulnerable. It's scary. Yeah. They don't like that. But with the right support from their friends and family, and if they're not, like, part of this is stigma. and normalizing it and saying to people, hey, I've also struggled with mental illness, or hey, I've seen this before. This happens sometimes, and we can easily, and you don't have to live like this, or you don't have to be in this state. Let me help you get to a place where you can feel better. Let's talk about it. What do you need? Like, asking people what they need can be helpful. Like, what are you worried about? Like, what do you need? What do you need to get to a place where we can go to the doctor? We can go talk to somebody, so you can get a therapist. Do you have any barriers to that? And sometimes it's stigma. Sometimes it's like they're worried about being perceived as someone who's ill and not doing well. And like that is a big problem in our society. Is like this idea that you've done something wrong, or you're not good enough, or that you are not the ideal American citizen because you're not productive and you're sick, right? Like there's this idea that you should be able to pick yourself up from your bootstraps and be able to deal with anything that comes your way. And that's just not how this works. Mental illness is a disease of your brain a lot of times. It's not just stress and, oh, I can't deal with how stressful my life is. It literally changes your brain chemistry and changes your ability to perceive things and cope with things, and makes you less resilient. And in the future, you'll be able to go to the doctor and get a blood test, a finger blood test at the doctor. It'll say, oh, your levels of this inflammatory chemical in your brain are really high. You must be struggling with stress or anxiety or depression. Let's talk about that. Like, there will be point of care testing in the future at doctors' offices for chemicals in your brain that will be able to match to mental illness. Eventually, we don't have that yet. We're getting closer. We can now see inflammatory chemicals like in the brain, like increasing for certain for certain things like depression and anxiety. We can see that, but that's one of the challenges in mental health care is we don't have lab tests for depression and anxiety yet. We don't have like objective values we can like find and look at. But in the future we will, and that's the thing about these things is like the point I want to get across is that a lot of times people think about mental illness as just something people can deal with and get over, and they'll get better over time, right? And sometimes you can't just deal with it, and sometimes you won't just get better. Sometimes you need a little bit of a nudging in the right direction with something, some sort of intervention, therapy, medication, a really helpful supportive friend, maybe, right? Like there could be situations where you don't need, therapy or medication. And sometimes you need your brain to get shocked with electricity, right? Sometimes there's like that level of help that you need, which is crazy. And it's really effective is electroconvulsive therapy. It's wild. And it's like in media as being the scary thing that people get like strapped to a gurney and electrocuted and they're a zombie. But no, actually it resolves like 70 to 80% of the illnesses that it treats. It's really crazy. It's really wild. It's really effective, with maybe a little bit of memory loss, that usually resolves. But it's interesting to see, it's to talk about this in this way and explain to people like, sometimes mental illness, it is an illness. It is a disease process in a lot of cases, and sometimes you can't just get over it, right?
Yeah. I have a few questions as we start to wrap things up here. Before I dive into these sort of wrap up and final thoughts from you, is there anything else specifically that you wanted to touch on today that we haven't brought up yet? There was one thing you put on the form about couples therapy and relationships, and I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
You want to touch on that for a minute?
That's an interesting thing. I was trained in Gottman couples therapy. There's a part of my training, and which I think is really interesting. It's a science, evidence-based form of couples therapy that literally took thousands of couples, put them in a lab, and coded their interactions to see if certain interactions caused people to break up or not. Like, they just looked at that over years of data. So 40 years of data later, and tens of thousands of couples, they found that certain things make people break up. And they call them, well, we'll talk about some of them. The 4 horsemen of relationships is what I
like this. Good title.
So if you're having an interaction with a partner in a fight and you are defensive, if you're critical, if you're condescending, or you're stonewalling, then you're having the 90% chance of breaking up with that person. Something like that. Defensiveness, right, is like not being receptive and open to what the person's saying, being critical, criticizing the other person, condescending is thinking you're better than the other person. That's the worst one. Condescending is actually the most predictive of divorce or breaking up. Being condescending, and then stonewalling, which is not wanting to talk about your emotions, shutting down. Usually it happens when people get too elevated and their heart rate gets above 100 and suddenly they are overwhelmed and they can't talk, and that's usually what stonewalling is. So when those things happen long term and you're not resolving conflict, that's the big thing I want to talk about is people who stay in relationships successfully can resolve conflict. They resolve it and then they repair it, right? So they're not sweeping things under the rug, bringing it up 1 month, 2 weeks later, whatever. They're dealing with it. And then when they deal with it, they repair it. And while they repair it, they're positive. Their interactions are 5 times more positive than negative while they're repairing the conflict. Isn't that wild to think about? That these what we call masters of relationships is what we call them. They're these couples that were studied who had been in relationships for like 30 years, right? They anytime they would go into the lab, their way that they resolved conflict was so genius that it was found that they were joking and having fun and positive during their resolution of conflict. And if you think about it in your life, who has lasted that long? Like, grandmother, grandfather, maybe a neighbor, but like they're usually jovial, happy people when they're in conflict with each other. They're usually not negative and drawing it out. Usually they deal with it and they move on, right?
Yeah.
And that was so wild to like see that relationships can be kind of coded and brought down to a level that's kind of digestible for most people. And so when I was doing this work, I was also in my own personal life struggling with like, why am I having such a hard time like finding people who I can date and be in relationships with, and I've dated people. Usually the relationships only last like a year, and I've learned that it's because I'm not successfully repairing conflict with people. I'm letting previous conflicts dwell, not be resolved, cause other problems in the relationship, and then those just usually everything spirals into worsening things. Like, and it all kind of boils down to communication and how you can communicate through those conflicts. And what's really cool about Gottman therapy, I encourage anyone who is interested in learning about this to look up Gottman therapy and read about it. There's lots of free information online. There's so many things online. But there's the relationship house in Gottman therapy, which describes how a relationship should work. And if you think about a house, it has foundations and it has walls, right? The walls of a relationship are trust and commitment. Without trust and commitment, the house falls. So you trust your partner, you believe everything they're saying, you're committed to your partner, and then the basement of the house is friendship and understanding that person and getting to know them. They're what we call love maps, what makes them tick, what they're interested in, the things they like. And then you build that friendship, and then after you've built the friendship, can you repair conflict? Can you resolve conflict? Can you deal with it? If you can move on to the next level of the house, which is higher order things like helping that person reach their goals and dreams, helping each other. Like, so there's a level of understanding that relationships take work. They require openness and not being defensive. And also people bring their traumas into relationships.
Yeah.
They bring their anxieties. A lot of people grew up with parents who have what we call anxious or avoidant attachment problems, where they're having trouble. They're worried that their partner's always going to leave them, or they don't trust their partner, or they're jealous, and that all gets translated to you as their child. And then when you grow up with that, you can have anxious attachment. So your primary attachment figure is usually your parent. So what if your parent had mental illness or struggled with relationships or whatever your parent had, it kind of gets translated to you as a child, and you kind of take that into your relationships. So it's important for people to kind of examine how they go into a relationship. Are they really anxious? Are they avoidant of a conflict? Are you having trouble dealing with conflict? You might be avoidant. You might be anxious. you might, and then that's a whole nother thing that you can look up and read about, understand what an attachment is. But what I'm trying to say is your attachment style kind of can indicate whether or not you're going to have a harder time dealing with conflict or bringing up conflict or resolving it. And kind of having that self-awareness can be very helpful in a relationship whenever your partner doesn't know that they are really bad at bringing up conflict, and maybe they need to know that. Maybe you'll need to have a discussion about, maybe on every Friday we're going to go to the Jackalope and we're going to sit down and have a beer and talk about our relationship and see how things are going. And so it's called a check-in. It's like having regular check-ins with your partner can be a way to like deal with conflict more effectively. And so there's all kinds of like cool strategies I learned and things I learned about relationships that makes me, I love being able to cut through the bullshit of relationships these days, because it's so, I don't know, parasocial, and people just expect relationships like, oh, we just didn't click or we didn't work, when really there's a lot of work that goes into relationships, and you have to kind of be okay with people's traumas and their stresses and their anxieties and be able to deal with it. And it's hard sometimes to make it work, and it's especially if you're gay. Let's be honest. Like, if you're gay relationships suck. I mean, everybody who's gay comes into it with a bunch of trauma, right? And so you kind of have to like be a lot more flexible and open with who you're dating, and like be okay with that, because people are going to bring so much baggage into it, you know, and that's part of life. So that was a really cool experience, and I don't think I'll ever go back into it, just because it is stressful, and like I like psychotherapy. I'm not as into it as I am medication, but yeah, it's a really cool experience. I loved it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
If you ever have any cool websites to recommend where I can read up on studies like that, let me know, because I do. One of the things I loved about The Body Keeps the Score, but also just in life in general, is I love numbers. I wasn't very good at statistics or in college, but I love reading about figures, whether it's the sad ones, like some of the ones in this book touching on like abuse and neglect and whatnot, the interesting ones, like the study with the couples that you were just mentioning and how long it took place and how many thousands of people were involved. That's crazy, but I love nerding out over those kind of case studies, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. I would say if anyone out here is trying to find information on like things, if you're ever trying to look something up online and trying to figure out like, oh, is there like a study on this or whatever, look for meta-analysis. Look for meta-analysis of things. Type in whatever you're typing in, and then at the end put meta-analysis, because really there are so many like studies out there, and a lot of them aren't done well. But randomized control trials are the highest standard. Randomized control trials with placebos are the highest standard, and then you can get meta-analysis of those randomized control trials, where they compile as many randomized control trials as they can into these meta-analysis, and those are usually the better examples of data and statistics, and like that's where you want to get the better data from. But yeah, if there's any good websites for this, I'll definitely send them to you. We can include them in the description of the podcast. Awesome. And yeah, there's some good Gottman resources I can send, some good handouts on how to deal with conflict and things like that. And so we can have those, and I can give you some of that information for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Absolutely. What else? Anything else on your end?
I'm trying to think.
We actually touched on, I think, now that we talked about the couples, we touched on every subject you put down on your form.
Good.
So we went through at least 95% of it, I think.
Good. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else we haven't really discussed too much? In general, yeah, I mean, I think when I was younger than 24, I just felt like I never felt like stable or comfortable or like things were going to be okay. And I feel like once I got past 25, things started getting much better. And then even now that I've turned 30, God, things are so much better and stable and make so much more sense than they did when I was 20, even 25 or 20. Oh God, 20 was terrible. So I feel like if you're out there and struggling with how things are going and how you're feeling, it will get better. It definitely gets better. I'd say if you're a teenager and you're in high school, and you are below the age of 25, I also would tell you not to smoke weed, not to use THC. It's really bad for your brain. And the number one cause of new onset schizophrenia cases right now in the United States is THC. Because kids start using THC when they're in high school, and it actually changes the way their brain develops, because it actually causes neuroproliferation of neurons that shouldn't be happening at that age. Your brain should be purging them during adolescence. Your brain likes to purge neurons and use the ones that are important. And if you're constantly using THC at really high doses, you're not allowing your brain to do that, and your neurons aren't migrating to where they should. And so by the time people get about 25 years old, 25 to 30 years old, they start developing schizophrenia or other mood disorders because their brain hasn't been able to develop correctly. And nowadays, you can get products with really high THC content.
Yeah.
And it can be really stressful for your brain, and it's very stimulating. THC is a stimulant. Is what people don't understand. It's very stimulating, and there are not actually different strains of weed and THC that one's calming, one's not. No, they're all basically the same thing. It's all about THC content versus CBD content, right? If you are going to use it, you should not use it all the time. You should use it occasionally.
Step one.
Right? And if you're addicted to it and you're having a hard time not using it, I get it. Try to reduce it where you can. Try to go talk to somebody about not using it. But and I get it. It can be a coping mechanism, but it is really bad for your brain at a young age if you're using it chronically. So that's one thing I would say. But yeah, also find people in your life who you can trust, like mentors. Find somebody, for me, it was a band director in high school who was absolutely amazing and really gave me a lot of confidence in myself that I didn't have. Find people who believe in you and kind of ask them, hey, would you be a mentor? Would you be someone I can call and talk to if I need that? Because those kind of people can be really grounding and important in your life if you don't have that. Professor, teacher, someone you trust, and somebody you can call on, somebody in your life that can be a guidance, someone who can guide you if you need it. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Reid, this has been so much fun.
Yeah.
Even though there have been some heavy topics, I like that you have been so good at balancing gravity with levity and how you present everything. And just thank you, man, so much.
Of course.
Just one last quote for you from the book. And then I have, I think, just 2 follow-up questions for you to wrap this thing up. This one is by someone named Rainer Maria. I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name. Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. And one of the reasons that one jumped out at me, every chapter starts off with 2 or 3 quotes, and I love reading the quotes. I highlighted almost all of them. I was like, that's a good one, that's a good one. Yeah. But probably about 2 years ago now, there's a teen who approached me in the gym that I go to, and he heard the podcast, and he heard a couple specific things that he wanted to come talk to me about. And one of the things that he revealed to me was that when he was about 16 years old, he tried to take his own life. And that surprised me because I'd never known someone that young who was having those thoughts before. So that night I went home, jumped onto the CDC's website, and saw that it was 2021, I believe, that somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 people ages 22 or 24 and younger had taken their own life, and that number blew me away. I was like, this is a lot. That's a really big number of young people, and it's going up. And so that specific quote, I wanted to read for anyone who maybe is listening, and is having those kinds of thoughts of just, Go ahead.
No, and that's the thing about suicidal ideation is it's temporary in a lot of cases. And a lot of the times when people go through with it, it's a very impulsive, spur of the moment thing. That's the majority of cases of people who actually go through with it. It's a very acute thing that happens, and they feel trapped. They don't feel like there's a way out, and that's when a lot of people go for the actual attempt. But one of the things we tell people is wait. Give yourself some time. usually that really highly acute period of intense ideation will go away, usually. Then there are some people who deal with it chronically, and that's a different thing. But it is increasing. It's an increasing problem. It's one of the largest issues facing young people, and thankfully there are some good medications now that help with that, including ketamine, lithium. There's some other things that are really good to help with that. But a lot of times, it's untreated mental illness. It's acute stress or long-term stress where people feel trapped and they can't get out. And it's important people understand that it can get better. It will get better. And before you do make a decision like that, remember that it can be a very temporary thing. You don't have to experience it. And if you are, it's okay if you are experiencing it. A lot of people live with like low level, what we call passive suicidal ideation, right? Passive meaning maybe they don't actually want to kill themselves, but maybe they just don't want to be alive. They don't want to be here, right? A lot of people live with that, and that's very normal. It's just whenever it gets to the point where you have a plan, you have intention, that's where we get worried, right? When people start thinking about, okay, I'm going to jump in front of a car, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, right? When people start making plans and have intention behind it, that's when you should go seek help and get a provider. And if, that's when there should be an intervention, especially if you're having consistent thoughts of a plan, intention, that kind of thing. I would say, even if, it's individual, talk to your provider, but yes, even passive ideation can be scary and maybe even lead to active. So anyone's struggling with SI, definitely go talk to somebody, because it is a very scary thing. But it is very common. Very common. A lot of people struggle with it, and it's okay if you're struggling with it. You're not going to get thrown in a mental hospital. It's more important that you talk about it with somebody and deal with it than hide it and struggle with it. Then nobody's going to throw you in a hospital just because you're having thoughts of wanting to not be alive. It's if you start making plans and intentions and telling people about your very specific plans to kill yourself, then maybe you will, maybe there'll be a little bit more intervention involved, because that's showing that there's some risk involved with you, right? There's some risk.
Yeah.
And so, but talking to your provider about how you're feeling and that, you feel trapped and you don't feel like there's a way out is very normal. And a lot of people feel that way. And I think it's important to normalize it so people will get help for it and talk about it. Otherwise, they're going to not, like we're seeing. And it's becoming quite the epidemic in America right now. So hopefully we can reverse that trend and do something about it. But
yeah, I think that same report from the CDC said 12 million people thought about it that year. And those were just the people that admitted to feeling like that, which means that number is actually even
a lot
higher, more than likely.
Higher.
So you are, I love that you did say that, we're not alone in those thoughts that we're having. Many more people are having them. We're just not speaking about them.
100%. Double the amount probably than that statistic, for sure.
I think I might know your answer to this next question, but I still want to ask it just to be safe. What are you most hopeful about? What gives you hope right now?
What am I most hopeful about? I am hopeful. There's so many ways to answer that question. I'm hopeful about people. I think in general, there's a lot of good in the world, and it's hard to see it sometimes, but you especially see it, I think, in times where there's a lot of adversity, a lot of stress, a lot of turmoil, and then people turn inward to their friends, to their family, to their community. Good things happen. I think searching for those things is important, searching for good, searching for positive. And I find a lot of hope in the art that people create, and a lot of hope in how people devote themselves to their work. And I find hope in people that way. I find hope in what they do, what they create, what they talk about, and I search for it. And the podcasts I listen to, the art I consume, the TV shows, the movies, the science that I do, I find hope in all those things. And it took me a while to kind of like see that, because there is a lot of hate and turmoil in the world, but hope resides in people. It resides in connections, your family, your friends, and sometimes you have to search for it, you have to find it, but it's there, and it usually prevails, right? And it can be very dark, but usually it's the darkest before it's the most
It's
light.
the darkest before the dawn.
Darkest before the dawn.
The night of darkest before the dawn. There it
you
is.
go. Darkest before the dawn. And sometimes people need to see the darkness before they realize the light, like how to get to the light, right? And that's what happened. I mean, that's what happened with me. I feel like I had to get to a point where I was low, and realized, okay, I need to be doing things differently, right?
Yeah.
And I think that metaphor carries out to all kinds of different things. So I hope that things get better, and I do have hope things will get better, and especially in the world of pharmaceuticals, I think things are going in the right direction. There's something to be said about big pharma and that kind of thing, but I think medications are going in the right direction, fewer side effects, people will get better on them, and great podcasts like this exist, and people can come here and learn about so many wonderful things and hopefully get inspired and go on and be creative and do great things.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful thing about life, is you constantly are inventing new things about yourself. You're finding new things about yourself. You're finding new experiences and learning new things through podcasts or books or media. And that's one of the joys I find in life is like self-improvement and learning, and constantly, like, there's always something to learn. And I mean, finding that sense of awe in things is really important for me. And like, either whether it's through like something I'm consuming or reading or watching, I'm looking for that sense of awe. Like, wow, that's cool. That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's impressive. That's a sense of importance and puts me back in my place in the world, which is, we are, the fact that we're here is wild. The fact that we're on Earth is wild.
Yeah.
The fact that we exist is crazy. One of my hobbies is like reading and looking and researching about that. But having a sense of that and understanding, we're only going to be on this earth for 80 to 100 years, if we're lucky, and realizing that we kind of have a pension, a duty to live our life to the fullest, to be fulfilled and actualized. And it's hard, but it can be very rewarding and fulfilling to try and do that. And having that perspective and understanding, like, hey, things aren't that serious, and we have to make the most of what we can with our time here is important, I think. So that's where I find hope, is like, people are going to be people, and they're going to be good and bad, and there's always good and bad with that, and I try to look for the good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm beyond grateful for is the now 120 plus guests like yourself who have given me hope.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it keeps working out that the right people say yes, but I feel like the people who are saying no when I invite them on are the right people to be saying no, and the people who say yes are the exact kind of people I'm looking for. So for whatever reason, you opened that message and took the phone call and said yes to coming on. Just such a huge thank you, man, because sitting across from just so many creative, hopeful, articulate people who have so courageously came on and told your story, and then what you did with that story and how you're turning it into something good and positive for the world, just lights my internal fire on a daily basis. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. That's very well said. I think it's a great opportunity to be here, and anytime you want me back, I'll be back.
Thank you. You will be back. I like to end each episode with just a ridiculous question, sort of based off the topics of conversation. Let's say you had all the money, all the support, you could sort of change any one system, or you could sort of snap your fingers and pull a Thanos and affect something on planet Earth. What do you think you would tackle first?
Oh, man.
Easy question, right?
Man. Fusion energy.
Okay, why?
I would do it. Endless energy, efficient. Yeah, could be efficient. But once you solve that, you're really, you're solving a lot of the like clean energy solution problems, the fossil fuel problems, air pollution problems, climate change. Like you're helping a lot of people get out of underneath like fossil fuels, and then you can translate that into electricity for everyone who needs it. You can translate that into clean energy and all kinds of applications. I think it's like a very important. I think we're close. Maybe we always there's a running joke that like we're always 10 years away from fusion energy, but we're close. We're getting closer, and I think we just need more funding. There's that. But my second thing I was like universal healthcare for all. That was my like, first thing that I was thinking about. But I think existentially, real worried about climate change, and I would like it if we could just snap our fingers and use the power of the sun to power everything. Right? Wouldn't that be fun? But I think in the United States, God, we need universal healthcare. Something. We need some sort of big payer system that can help people not go broke from breaking the wrist or something. But I think that we're getting closer. I think we're moving in the right direction. We're getting closer on all accounts. But having the power of sun in the back of your pocket would be fun too. So
yeah. Just out of curiosity, have you ever read the book Upstream by Dan Heath?
No.
Do you like to read when you have time?
I like to listen to books. Yeah.
Okay. If you ever are looking on Audible for something new, Upstream is a very good book. It's about 12 to 14 different case studies where every chapter is one case study. And in one chapter, they look at how a city solved the dropout rates in the high school population. Next chapter is about how they, in a different cities, tackled domestic abuse. Another one was about the healthcare system as it specifically relates to babies losing their wristbands and going home to the wrong parents. So it's these 12 wildly different case studies, but the overarching theme of the book is to try to get you in a mindset of, instead of constantly putting out fire after fire after fire, how do you prevent the fires from starting in the first place? And that's how you move upstream. One of the easiest read, lots of numbers, lots of case studies. It's a very fun time. Dan Heath, I think, did the Audible himself, and he has a very relaxing voice. Might put you to sleep. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, for better or for worse. But I would highly recommend Upstream if you need something to tickle your eardrums in 2025.
Yes. Prevention is the best thing we can do, for sure, for a lot of different things, including healthcare. Like preventative medicine, huge. Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Well, Reid, thank you so much for being here. To the audience, my ask of you guys today as we wrap up this episode is, if you got something out of this, normally I ask you guys, go leave 5 stars there, 5 stars there, subscribe to this, like that, comment on that. I'm not going to do any of that today. Instead, I would ask you to do something different. Take this episode and send it to someone. Whoever just was on your mind as you listened to it, for whatever reason, your gut just made this person's name come to mind. Send them a link to the episode. Tell them you listened to it, you enjoyed it, and that they should check it out, or maybe customize the message a little bit for why you thought of it and why you want to send it to them. And if you guys will do that small, even if you don't do that, my commitment to you guys is that I'm going to keep finding awesome guests like Reid every Saturday night to come on and deliver stories that will light your internal fire. With that being said, everyone, I hope you stay healthy, stay happy, and have a good Saturday night. Bye, guys.